Welcome back to Tabletop Assault. I'm Ross, and today I'm going to be looking at the Tyranid Index armor rules, giving you a bit of my first impressions of them. So what we'd notice is that they are a lot more simple than previous editions, and I suppose this is going from they're saying that they wanted to make the rules simplified but not simple, I believe is the saying. And in some ways I think that has been quite a success. We'll see how that goes with the game going forward, and it does give us a real good flavour of what we're going to see with the other forces and their indexes. So with that, let's have a look at the rules. Starting off with the Tyranid army rules. Now these are the sort of general rules that affect all Tyranid armies, where we have different detachments, at the moment only one, but we will get more later on. This will affect every one of those detachments, so these rules affect all of them, and then you get more with the different detachment that you take. So what are the Tyranid army rules? Well, there appears to be only really two of them, that being Synapse and Shadow in the Warp. So Synapse: if your army is Tyranids, Tyranid units within 6 inches of a Synapse unit is considered to be within Synapse range. If Tyranid units within Synapse range, battle shock tests are taken at 3d6 instead of 2d6. Now, when it comes to army rules, I really don't like losing and protecting sort of rules where things go wrong and you have a little bit of protection against them. Now, I suppose that's maybe a little bit different to, say, having damage mitigation, which you could argue, yeah, that's a bit of defensive ability. This one just feels a little bit less rewarding to me. The other thing I'd say that might be a bit interesting is to see how effective Battle Shock will be. In essence, morale has been one of those things that's been a wee bit hard to balance for the past couple of editions, mainly because has it been useful, or is it better just to wipe out the unit in its entirety? I can see the use of Battle Shock certainly, but I haven't played a game of 10th edition yet, not had a chance yet. But will it be just better in a lot of senses to remove that unit so they are ultimately no threat whatsoever versus trying to hopefully battle shock it? I'm not sure. It will really depend on how this edition goes. I think it can be good. It will be all dependent on what battle shock in terms of other things that can be done with it. So yeah, as a defensive ability it's okay, but it's not really fulfilling me with, wow, that's a really cool rule. Next one is Shadow in the Warp, which is if your army is Tyranids, once per battle, if in either player's command phase. If you have a unit with Shadow in the Warp, you can activate this ability, and every enemy unit must take a Battle Shock test. So, in essence, for your enemy, that's going to really matter in terms of taking Battle Shock tests, not so much for you on the defensive side. I think, again, it could be well timed. It really is, again, dependent on how important Battle Shock is going to be. Is it better to just wipe out the unit and not worry about it? Though in this case, I suppose, even if they are not wiped out, you just simply activate the Battle Shock and it affects everyone, so it's not about really wiping out units there. I think it'll be situational on that side. Neither of these rules are filling me with, oh wow, that's a really cool army-wide rule. They're fine. Of the previews we've seen, I've seen better ones. Not so exciting on this one, but I'm intrigued to see what people think. If it's going to be something that's hugely useful, maybe something missed, let me know. In the next section, we're going to be looking at the first detachment we have for Tyranids, and this is the Invasion Fleet Detachment rules. So you get a sort of army-wide rule, you get some stratagems, and you get enhancements for characters. So when it comes to the Invasion Fleet Detachment rule, it's hyper adaptations. At the start of the first battle round, you can choose one of these abilities that affects the whole army. Swarming insects: each time a Tyranid unit attacks an infantry or swarm unit, gains sustain hits 1. Hyper-aggression: each time a Tyranid unit attacks a monster or vehicle unit, gain lethal hits. Hive Predators: each time a Tyranid unit attacks a character unit, if a critical hit is scored, that attack has precision. Overall, I think this is fantastic. It is very simply to implement, it's not overly complicated. I think tournament players will like it because it means they can change their playstyle on the fly, depending on who they're playing against, so I think that really works into the hyper adaptation rule. I think that's really, really cool. I think it may be interesting to see when it comes against things like Knights, where you've got a very, very obvious choice there, but maybe there might be a few options that might be more suitable, I don't know. I certainly lean towards the hyper aggression, of course, because it's going to be all monsters and vehicles, I suppose, there. But yeah, I think because of the simplicity of it, not overly complicated, not having too much to think, is that you go, right, cool, this is what I'm going to do, and it's going to affect the rest of the game. Fantastic. Very simple, very easy, and it's meaningful. This is a rule I really like. On to the enhancements now, which seem to be the replacement for warlord traits and relics, so bundling them into one, which I don't know how I feel about that. Sometimes when it comes to characters, I really prefer making them each all a bit more unique. I'm thinking of back in I think it's the Chaos Space Marine Codex 3.5, where, you know, customizing a character was a wild ride in itself. There was just so many options. I suppose keeping it simple is good, but when you've got a character, sometimes I like it to be a little bit more impactful, a little bit more customizable. But I think the previous editions have maybe changed my opinion on that, because we had so many warlord traits and relics that really were not impactful in any way and were simply there just to fill up space. So let's see if any of these are filling up space, and there are only 4 of them. So we have Alien Cunning, which is after both players have deployed, select 3 Tyranid units from your army and redeploy them. You can set them up in Strategic Reserve regardless of how many units are already in Strategic Reserve. A mass redeployment can be a very effective thing. You know, it's one of those things that where if you've made any mistakes on your side or see a key area of your opponent's deployment that you can exploit, then yeah, this could be very, very useful. It's one of the things, if you do something badly, then you or your opponent, I suppose, do something badly, then you can either fix it or exploit the mistake your opponent made. But really, it's never been one of the ones I've been super into. I think some people can use it well, and I think if you really think about the game really well, then you can actually make the most out of it. If you're like me, who mainly plays for fun, I like things a bit more combative, you know, rather than the redeployments. And speaking of being more combative, we have Perfectly Adapted. Models can once per turn reroll 1 hit, wound, damage, advanced charge, or saving throw for the bearer. I think this has been a staple for a while now. Simply is free rerolls or free rerolls. I've seen different iterations of this that have actually been, I think, a little bit more impactful rather than just once per turn. But if you're thinking about once per turn, that can be quite a number of rerolls. That's both your turn and your opponent's. So that could be quite a lot. If you are playing quite an aggressive character, this could actually pay off quite a bit of dividends. So yeah, I actually do rate this one quite well. It's been solid for quite a long time. I think it's made sense to bring it back in. Synaptic Linchpin, which is synaptic range for the bearer is 9 inches. Again, I think this is going to be quite dependent when it comes to how people are going to use Synapse. The obvious reason for having Synapse is Battle Shock, but then in a lot of ways there are stratagems and abilities that are dependent on Synapse. So it's not just thinking of the Battle Shock reason for Synapse, it is going to be dependent on really when it comes to the range of how you're going to utilise stratagems and other unit abilities. So it can be quite important, but that essentially takes it from, you know, if you have that 12-inch bubble around your character and then it becomes much, much bigger. Yeah, I could see that being quite useful. I don't know how I feel on that one, mainly because I really like the Perfectly Adapted, but I do think it is one of those ones that if we are seeing Synapse being useful, which I think it is, certainly for the stratagems, then it is going to be very important to keep your units in Synapse range to make sure you get the most out of them. Adaptive Biology, bearer has 5 up feel no pain. At the start of any turn, if a bearer has less than its starting wounds remaining, gain 4 plus feel no pain. This is, again, one of those ones that's been a bit of a staple, where you've had this sort of damage mitigation on Tyranids, where if they start a turn or start somewhere where they've suffered a bit of wounds, they actually get rewarded by being more survivable later on. I really like this one. 5 up feel no pain is good in on itself, I think that's quite good. But then you're also getting a further up to 4 plus, which really pushes it to a nice way. That is 4 plus damage mitigation after other saves, so I think that is really, really good in itself. If you're looking for something to be a bit more of a tank unit, you really have to survive the sort of first turn it takes damage, then afterwards you're going to be rewarded with it quite a bit more. Overall, I actually rate all these. Some of them seem like they are some of the top spot relics or warlord traits from the previous editions. They've seen the ones that have worked, people have chosen, and they've gone, yeah, just keep them. And honestly, that might be the best way forward. What's the point of filling up a page going, well, we need to have 10, 12, 15 relics, warlord traits, whatever, and filling them up, when simply just keep it simple to the ones that people use and not the ones that people don't use. I suppose there can be some argument that people just want the options because someone will use the one that's least used somewhere. But honestly, to keep the game a bit more simple, just having these 4 at the moment is quite good. Now comes a contentious part of the game, which is of course stratagems, which many people obviously, well, they hope that stratagems would not be in further editions. Some people have liked them, some people haven't, but they are here to stay, and honestly I am actually really happy with how they've now implemented them going forward. Having a big book of general ones that people can use, and then we have only 6 which will be added to that roster instead of having up to, I think sometimes it was into 20 plus, especially if you had some extra detachment ones. Now you're down to 6, and then your general army ones, and it just makes the game a lot easier to keep in your head. So I'm a big fan of this. I think some people actually prefer to having more rules from more choice, more selection, but when you have only 6 of them, you do have to make them all meaningful. So let's see if they are. First we have Rapid Regeneration. There's a battle tactic stratagem costing 1 command point. When you use it is opponent's shooting phase or fight phase just after an enemy unit selects its target. The target is one Tyranid unit selected as the target of one or more of the attacking unit's attacks. Till the end of the phase, unit gets 6+ funeral pain, if within synapse is 5+. Extremely effective, very good. I don't usually rate 6 up funeral pains though for 1 command point. Yeah, not bad, but 5 up for 1 command point is excellent, so I think that's really good. For 1 command point, that's an absolute staple. Death Frenzy, Strategic Ploy Stratagem, cost 1 command point. When do you use it? Fight phase after an enemy unit has selected its target. Target is one Tyranid unit from your army that was selected for 1 or more attacks. And the effect, until the end of phase, if that model has not fought and is destroyed, roll a 4+. Do not remove from play. That model can attack after the enemy unit attacks, is then removed from play. Again, this could be quite an effective one. A little bit of a gamble because you have to spend that command point before the unit has actually attacked, so you don't know if the models are actually going to die. But at 1 command point, it's one of those situations where you can go, yeah, this might happen, I would like to attack back. If you do succeed in killing me, then sure, I will get to attack back. So yeah, I think for 1 command point, absolute stellar one. I think that is definitely one that will be used quite often. Adrenal Surge, which is a battle tactic stratagem costing 2 command points. When do you use it? During the fight phase. Target is 2 Tyranid units from your army within synapse range, or 1 not in synapse range that are eligible to fight. Until the end of the phase, successful hit rolls of 5+ are critical hits. Now, this will be interesting to see how this works out, because there'll be, well, essentially you've got the hyper adaptions that will work quite well with that. Sustain hits or lethal hits or even precision, quite useful there. But there might be other abilities and useful stuff that will stack on top of it to really get the most out of it. The fact it does reward you for synapse is absolutely fantastic. I think that's really good there. And I think if you do get units, two units affected by this at 2 command points, it's going to be absolutely worth it. 1 unit already is actually not bad in on itself, but 2, that is quite a bargain. I think that would be quite good, and again, one that I really like. We then have Overrun, which is a strategic ploy stratagem costing 1 command point. When do you use it? Fight phase, just before Tyranid unit from your army consolidates. The target, that Tyranid unit, I assume just 1. Effect can make a consolidation move of 6 inches instead of 3 inches, but remain in coherency and within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units. If within synapse and non-engagement range, it can instead just make a normal move up to 6 inches. I think this one's a bit more specific. It's not one of those ones that's going to be an absolute staple. You're just going to have to find the right situation which it's going to be useful for. But the mobility is very important in the game, keeping up pressure, whether to remain in engagement range or move on to an objective or what have you. Yeah, having movement is always very essential. Synaptic Insight, which is a strategic ploy stratagem costing 1 command point. When do you use it? Command phase. And target is 2 Tyranids units from your army within synapse range, or 1 not in synapse range. So select 1 hyper adaptation. Until the end of the battle round, that hyper adaptation is active for those units in addition to any other currently active for your army. Restrictions: you cannot choose the one you select at the start of battle round. You can't use it twice. For 1 command point, I think this is a very effective ability. It allows you to be a bit more precise with what ability do you want to use. Maybe you're in a situation where you've taken one of the hyper adaptions, want to switch out or gain the benefit of both. Then yeah, this can be pretty good. And again, you're rewarded for synapse range. Even at 1 unit for 1 command point, this would be good. But again, rewarded for 2, just rewards synapse range even further. Again, an absolute fantastic stratagem, really good. Then Endless Swarm, which is strategic ploy stratagem, 1 command point. When to use? Your command phase. Target up to 2 Endless Multitude units that are in synaptic range, or 1 Endless Multitude unit. The effect is D3 +3 destroyed models or return to the affected units. As usual, it's the units you'd kind of suspect, so your Termagants, Hormagaunts, Neurogants, Gargoyles, these sort of, again, Endless Swarm ones, though I don't believe it's for Ripper Swarms. Possibly not worth it for one command point. Looking at the previous ones, I think you're going to get more reward there, but again, there will be points where you may need to just return the numbers back to your field. 6 free models is not bad, but when they're dying as easily as these models, it's not quite ideal. But then again, the amount of tax that, you know, Hormagaunts get, which is quite good. Yeah, I can see certainly a bit of a benefit to this one. Usually I'd say models returning back would be an absolute fantastic thing, but in this one I'm going to say it's nowhere near as impactful as some of the other ones have the potential to be. And that is it for the Tyranid Index Army rules. Give me my first impression. As you know, I'm not covering data sheets here, this is just the Army rules. I will be looking at some of the key choice data sheets that I like later on, and maybe looking at all of them in a bit more detail once I've had a chance to really dive through them and get a bit more feedback from the community, and we'll see what's really strong, though I do have a highlight section for that later. Overall, I do like the format of this. It has made the game a lot more simple, and I think some people are going to find that negative, some people are going to find that positive. For myself, the areas I do like is that there is the clear distinction of there's the army rule, then the detachment rule you get, which is fine. That the stratagems you get are now just held behind that detachment. Maybe I would say in that sense that maybe a few more of the key ones maybe in the rulebook need to be added. There was some I really wanted in there, but that's for another case. And I just think it's a lot more easier to keep your head around your army overall rules. You know, the stratagems, they were getting a little bit out of hand. There was relics, warlord traits that were just simply not usable, or at least not useful. And I think this has got a real good balance area to begin with between useful abilities overall. Only a few areas I'm a little bit disappointed on, but again, we'll see how that plays out later. So thanks again for watching. Please comment, share, like and subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts on the Tyranid Index are. Are you quite hopeful for them? Are you looking forward to seeing maybe new detachments coming out later on and what their abilities might be? Do you think they've done a first good round when it comes to this one here? Let me know, and I'll see you on another Tabletop Assault Battle Report.